The crystal champagne flute slipped from Mrs. Pemberton's manicured fingers as I approached her table. The sound of shattering glass cutting through the elegant murmur of the Metropolitan Children's Foundation Gala. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge the mess, didn't even pause in her animated conversation about her recent acquisition of a Monet sketch. To her, I was simply part of the Cinerian, other uniformed server whose job was to clean up after her without disturbing her important social interactions. "Excuse me," I said quietly, kneeling to collect the larger pieces of crystal while other servers rushed to assist with the cleanup. "I'll have this taken care of right away." Mrs. Pemberton continued her conversation as if I hadn't spoken, as if the person cleaning up her mess was no more worthy of acknowledgement than the furniture or the floral arrangements. Around her, the other guests at table 12 maintained their discussion about art investments and vacation homes, their voices carrying the casual confidence of people who had never doubted their place in the world. I had been serving at charity galas for 3 years, working my way through business school by taking catering jobs that paid well and offered glimpses into a world. I was determined to join not as hired help, but as an equal. Tonight's event at the Grand Meridian Hotel was particularly significant. Not just because it was the city's most prestigious charity gala, but because it was being held in the hotel I had just purchased. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months ago, I had been serving champagne to these same people at similar events. Invisible in my black uniform and white apron. Tonight, I was still serving champagne, but tomorrow morning I would be announcing the acquisition of the Grand Meridian Hotel by my newly formed hospitality company, Chen Luxury Properties. "Maria," whispered Sophia, another server who had become a friend during our months working these events together. "Table 7 is asking for more champagne, and Mrs. Ashworth at table 3 wants to know if we have anything older than the 2015 vintage." I nodded, balancing my tray as I made my way through the ballroom, weaving between tables where 500 of the city's most influential people celebrated their charitable generosity while remaining oblivious to the servers who made their evening possible. The guest list read like a who's who of local power politicians, business leaders, philanthropists, and socialites whose names appeared regularly in the society pages. As I approached table 7, I caught fragments of conversation that revealed the casual assumptions these people made about the world around them. "The service here has really declined," complained Harrison Blackwood, a real estate developer whose company had tried unsuccessfully to acquire the Grand Meridian 6 months earlier. "These servers seem so transient, no sense of professional pride." "Well, what do you expect?" replied his wife Margaret. "It's not like this is a career for them. They're probably just working their way through college or trying to make ends meet between real jobs." The dismissiveness in her voice was breathtaking. The casual assumption that serving at high-end events was somehow beneath serious consideration as legitimate work. She had no idea that the transient server refilling her champagne glass had just closed a $8 million acquisition deal that would make her one of the youngest hotel owners in the city. "Excuse me," miscalled Victoria Ashworth from table 3, her voice carrying the imperious tone of someone accustomed to immediate attention. "We've been waiting for champagne for quite some time. Is there some problem with the service tonight?" "Not at all, Mrs. Ashworth," I replied, approaching her table with a fresh bottle of Dom Perignon Arlingling Ba, the older vintage she had requested. I apologize for the delay. As I poured the champagne, Victoria continued her conversation with the other guests at her table, discussing the evening's auction items and the social implications of various bidding strategies. I was present but invisible, acknowledged only as a function rather than as a person. "The hotel business is so unpredictable these days," said Dr. Patricia Williams, a museum director who served on several nonprofit boards. "I heard the Grand Meridian was sold recently, though no one seems to know who bought it. Probably some foreign investment group looking to flip it for a quick profit." "Such a shame," Victoria agreed. "This hotel has such history, such elegance. It would be terrible to see it turned into some generic luxury chain property." I finished pouring their champagne and moved on to the next table, carrying with me the knowledge that tomorrow's announcement would reveal exactly who had purchased their beloved Grand Meridian and. It wasn't a foreign investment group or a generic luxury chain. The evening continued with its familiar rhythm of service and social interaction, but I found myself observing the guests with new eyes. These were the people who would soon be my customers, my partners in business ventures, my peers in the hospitality industry. Yet tonight, they looked through me as if I didn't exist. Their interactions limited to requests for drinks and complaints about service timing. Maria Sophia appeared at my side again, her expression troubled. "Mrs. Pemberton is asking to speak with the manager. She says her champagne glass was dirty, and she wants to complain about the quality of service." I almost smiled at the irony. Mrs. Pemberton wanted to complain to the manager about service quality, not knowing that she was speaking to someone who would soon own the establishment where she was dining. "I'll handle it," I said, making my way back to table 12, where Mrs. Pemberton sat with an expression of refined displeasure. "Ma'am," I said, approaching her with the deferential manner that these events required, "I understand you have a concern about your champagne glass." "Indeed I do," Mrs. Pemberton replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone who expected immediate resolution to any problem. The glass was clearly not properly cleaned, and frankly, the entire service this evening has been substandard. "I want to speak with your manager immediately." "I'll be happy to address your concerns," I said calmly. "What specifically would you like me to tell the management about tonight's service?" "Tell them that this hotel's reputation is suffering due to poor staff training and inadequate attention to detail. Tell them that guests of this caliber expect excellence, not the kind of careless service we've experienced tonight." The complaint was particularly rich, coming from someone who had created the very mess she was now criticizing, but I maintained my professional composure. "I'll make sure your feedback reaches the appropriate people," I assured her. "Is there anything else I can do to improve your experience this evening?" Mrs. Pemberton waved me away dismissively, already returning her attention to her table mates and their discussion of upcoming social events. To her, I was a problem that had been addressed and could now be forgotten. As the evening progressed toward the auction portion of the gala, I continued serving champagne and observing the social dynamics that would soon shift dramatically. These people moved through their world with the casual confidence of those who had never questioned their place in the hierarchy, who had never imagined that the servers attending to their needs might possess ambitions, intelligence, or resources that rivaled their own. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the evening's host, news anchor Richard Sterling. "We're about to begin tonight's auction, featuring some truly extraordinary items donated by our generous supporters." The auction was a spectacle of competitive generosity, with guests bidding thousands of dollars on vacation packages, art pieces, and exclusive experiences. I watched from the service area as they raised their paddles with the casual ease of people for whom money was simply a tool for social positioning. The next item, Richard announced, is a weekend stay in the presidential suite of the Grand Meridian Hotel, including dinner for 4 at the hotel's award-winning restaurant. This is truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to experience luxury at its finest. The bidding was enthusiastic, with several guests competing for the privilege of staying in the very hotel where they were currently dining. The winning bid of $8,000 came from Harrison Blackwood, the same developer who had complained about the service quality just hours earlier. As the auction continued and the evening moved toward its conclusion, I found myself thinking about tomorrow's announcement and the reactions it would generate. These people who had ignored me, dismissed me, and complained about me would soon discover that the invisible server they had barely acknowledged was now their peer and, in some cases, their superior in the business world they dominated. The transformation wouldn't happen overnight. Changing from invisible service worker to visible business owner would require more than just a press release and a new wardrobe. But the foundation had been laid through 3 years of observation, learning, and careful planning that none of these guests could have imagined. As I collected empty glasses and prepared for the evening's final service, I realized that my invisibility had been an advantage. While they had dismissed me as irrelevant, I had been studying their world, understanding their expectations, and preparing to enter their sphere on my own terms. Tomorrow, when the news broke about the Grand Meridian's new owner, they would have to recalibrate their assumptions about who belonged in their world and how people arrived there. The server they had ignored would become the business owner they would have to acknowledge. The champagne I had served them tonight would taste very different when they realized who had been pouring it. The morning after the gala, I stood in my new office on the 42nd floor of the Grand Meridian Hotel, watching the city wake up below me while preparing for the press conference that would change everything. The view from the owner's suite was spectacular floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic vista of the downtown district where I had worked as a server just hours before. Ms. My assistant Marcus Rivera entered with a stack of newspapers and a tablet displaying early online coverage. The press release went out an hour ago, and the response has been ... significant. I accepted the newspapers, scanning headlines that ranged from mystery buyer revealed. Local entrepreneur acquires Grand Meridian 2 from server to owner. The remarkable rise of Maria Chen. The business section of the Times featured a full-page article about the acquisition, complete with financial details that would surprise many of the guests who had dismissed me the night before. Any reactions from last night's gala attendees? I asked. Several, Marcus replied with barely concealed amusement. Mrs. Pemberton's office called 3 times, asking for confirmation of the story. Harrison Blackwood's assistant requested an immediate meeting to discuss potential business opportunities. And Victoria Ashworth's publicist wants to arrange a lunch to discuss the hotel's upcoming social calendar. The sudden interest from people who had barely acknowledged my existence 12 hours earlier was both predictable and revealing. My transformation from invisible server to visible business owner had triggered an immediate recalibration of how I was perceived and valued. What about the staff? I asked. How are they responding to the news? Excited, mostly. Sophia and the other servers are thrilled that someone who understands their work is now in charge. The management team is nervous but optimistic. Everyone's curious about what changes you'll implement. Through my office windows, I could see the hotel's elegant facade, its limestone exterior and Art Deco details that had made it a landmark since its construction in 1928. The Grand Meridian had hosted presidents and celebrities, business deals and charity galas, serving as a symbol of luxury and sophistication for nearly a century. Now it was mine, Ms. Chen. Marcus interrupted my thoughts. The press conference is scheduled for 11, and we have reporters from every major outlet confirmed to attend. Are you ready for the questions about your background and how you financed the acquisition? I'm ready, I said, though I knew the questions would be challenging. The business press was fascinated by the story of a server who had somehow accumulated enough capital to purchase a $40 million hotel, and they would want details about my path from catering events to owning them. The truth was both simpler and more complex than they would expect. My parents had immigrated from Taiwan when I was 5, bringing with them a small fortune from the sale of their electronics manufacturing business. They had invested wisely in real estate and technology stocks, building wealth while working modest jobs that allowed them to blend into their new community without attracting attention. When they died in a car accident during my sophomore year of college, I had inherited not just their grief, but their carefully accumulated assets. Instead of using the money for a lavish lifestyle, I had continued working service jobs while completing my MBA, learning about the hospitality industry from the ground up, while my inheritance grew through careful investment. Ms. Chen, Marcus said, "There's someone here to see you. She says she's from last night's gala and that it's urgent." "Who is it?" "Mrs. Victoria Ashworth. She seems ... agitated." I smiled, remembering Victoria's imperious demands for older champagne and her complaints about service quality. "Send her in. This should be interesting." Victoria Ashworth entered my office with the kind of forced composure that suggested she was struggling to process the dramatic shift in our relative positions. The woman who had treated me as invisible, hired help 12 hours earlier, now stood in my office as a supplicant seeking an audience. "Maria," she began, her voice carrying a warmth that had been completely absent the night before. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced. I wanted to congratulate you on your remarkable achievement." "Thank you," I said, gesturing for her to take a seat in one of the leather chairs facing my desk. "Though I have to say, your interest in my achievements is quite a change from last night." Victoria's composure flickered slightly. "I'm not sure what you mean. Last night, when I was serving champagne at your table, you complained about the service quality and demanded to speak with the manager. You treated me as if I was invisible, as if my only value was in how quickly I could refill your glass." The directness of my observation clearly made Victoria uncomfortable, but she maintained her diplomatic smile. "I'm sure there was some misunderstanding. I certainly didn't intend any disrespect." "There was no misunderstanding," I said gently. "You behaved exactly as you always behave toward service staff, with casual dismissal and unconscious superiority. The only thing that's changed is your knowledge of who I am and what I own." Victoria was quiet for a moment, clearly calculating how to respond to such a direct challenge. "Maria, I came here to discuss business opportunities. The Grand Meridian hosts many of our foundation's events, and I wanted to ensure that our relationship continues smoothly." "What kind of relationship are you envisioning?" "Well, we've been holding our annual gala here for 5 years. It's become quite an important tradition for our donors. And we'd hate to have to find a new venue. The implicit threat was clear: conform to our expectations or lose our business." But Victoria had misjudged both my financial position and my priorities. "Mrs. Ashworth," I said, "let me be clear about something. The Grand Meridian doesn't need your foundation's business to survive. Your annual gala represents less than 1% of our revenue. What I'm interested in is whether your foundation is ready to treat my staff with the respect they deserve." "I don't understand." "I understand perfectly. Last night, I watched you and your fellow board members treat the serving staff as if they were invisible, as if their only value was in their ability to anticipate your needs without disturbing your conversations. That kind of behavior is no longer acceptable in my hotel." Victoria's diplomatic mask began to slip, revealing something closer to her true feelings. "Are you seriously going to lecture me about how to behave at charity events? Do you have any idea how much money our foundation has raised for children's causes?" "I'm sure you've raised significant amounts," I agreed, "but I'm more interested in how you treat the people who make your events possible. Charity that's built on the dehumanization of workers isn't really charity, it's just another form of exploitation." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on my office door. Marcus entered with an apologetic expression and a business card. "Ms. Chen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Harrison Blackwood is here. He says he has an urgent business proposal that can't wait." I looked at the business card. Harrison Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Development. The same man who had complained about service quality while bidding $8,000 for a weekend stay in my hotel. "Send him in," I said. Mrs. Ashworth was just leaving. Victoria stood with obvious reluctance, clearly unhappy about having her conversation cut short. "Maria, I hope you'll reconsider your position. Our foundation has been a valued partner of this hotel for years. And you're welcome to continue that partnership," I replied, "as long as you're willing to treat my staff with basic human dignity. The choice is yours." After Victoria left, Harrison Blackwood entered with the kind of aggressive confidence that had made him successful in real estate development. He was a man in his 60s, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted through a combination of charm and intimidation. "Maria," he said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Congratulations on your acquisition. Quite a surprise to everyone in the business community." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Though I have to say, your interest in my business acumen is quite different from your assessment of my professional capabilities last night." Harrison's smile faltered slightly. "I'm not sure I follow." Last night, while I was serving champagne at your table, you complained that the servers seemed transient and lacked professional pride. You dismissed the entire service staff as people just working their way through college or trying to make ends meet. Between real jobs, I'm sure I didn't mean anything personal by those comments. Of course you didn't. You never considered that any of us might be people with ambitions, intelligence, or resources that rivaled your own. You saw us as temporary fixtures, not as human beings with complex lives and goals. Harrison shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for such a direct confrontation. Look, Maria, I came here to discuss business. Blackwood Development has been interested in the Grand Meridian for years. We made several offers to the previous owners, and I wanted to explore whether you might be interested in a partnership. What kind of partnership? We could handle the development side while you maintain operational control. There's tremendous potential for expansion, additional floors, conference facilities, maybe even a second tower. We could turn this into the premier luxury destination in the city. The proposal was ambitious, but it was also exactly the kind of thinking that had made the previous owners willing to sell. They had seen the hotel as a real estate asset rather than as a hospitality business, focusing on maximizing square footage rather than optimizing guest experience. Mr. Blackwood, I said, I appreciate your interest, but I'm not looking for development partners. I'm looking to preserve and enhance what makes the Grand Meridian special, not to maximize its real estate potential. But think about the returns, Harrison pressed. We could double the revenue within 5 years and destroy the character that makes this hotel worth preserving. I didn't buy the Grand Meridian to turn it into another generic luxury tower. I bought it because I understand what makes hospitality special. Harrison's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching frustration. With respect, Maria, you've been working in catering for 3 years. What could you possibly know about running a major hotel? The question revealed everything about his assumptions and limitations. To him, my experience serving at events was irrelevant to understanding hospitality, rather than being the most valuable education I could have received. Mr. Blackwood, I said, standing to signal that our meeting was over. I know what it feels like to be treated as invisible by people who should value your contribution. I know what it's like to watch guests complain about service while creating the very problems they're criticizing. I know what it means to provide hospitality rather than just luxury. That experience has taught me more about what makes hotels successful than any development project could. The Grand Meridian will succeed because it treats both guests and staff with respect, not because it maximizes square footage. As Harrison left my office, clearly frustrated by his inability to convince me to embrace his vision, I realized that the morning's conversations had established an important precedent. The transformation from invisible server to visible business owner wasn't just about changing my own status, it was about changing how the entire hospitality industry understood the relationship between service and dignity. The silence that had surrounded me as a server was about to become a very different kind of quiet, the respectful attention that comes when people realize they've underestimated someone whose true capabilities are finally being revealed. The press conference at 11 o'clock was standing room only, with reporters from business publications, local news outlets, and hospitality trade magazines packed into the Grand Meridian's elegant conference room. I stood at the podium where countless politicians, business leaders, and celebrities had made announcements over the decades. But this felt different, more personal, more transformative. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, looking out at the sea of faces that included several familiar ones from the previous night's gala. Thank you for joining me today to discuss the future of the Grand Meridian Hotel under new ownership. The questions came quickly, focusing initially on the financial details of the acquisition and my plans for the property. But as the session progressed, the inquiries became more personal, more probing about my background and the journey that had led me to this moment. Ms. Chen, asked Jennifer Walsh from the Business Tribune, our research shows that you've been working in catering and event services for the past 3 years. How did you accumulate the capital necessary for a $40 million acquisition? It was the question I'd been expecting, and I answered it directly. My parents were successful business owners in Taiwan before immigrating to the United States. When they passed away during my college years, I inherited their assets, which I've been carefully investing while completing my education and gaining experience in the hospitality industry. But why work as a server if you had access to significant capital? Pressed David Kim from The Times. Why not pursue a more traditional path into hotel management? Because I wanted to understand the hospitality industry from the ground up, I replied. I wanted to learn what makes guests feel welcome, what challenges service staff face, and how the best hotels create experiences that go beyond just luxury amenities. Can you give us specific examples of what you learned? Asked Sarah Martinez from Hospitality Today. I paused, thinking about the hundreds of events I'd worked, the thousands of interactions I'd observed, the patterns of behavior that had revealed so much about both guest and staff. I learned that true hospitality isn't about expensive furnishings or prestigious locations. I said, it's about making people feel valued and respected. I learned that the best service comes from staff who feel appreciated and empowered, not from people who are treated as invisible. I also learned, I continued, that many guests who consider themselves sophisticated and cultured are actually quite limited in their understanding of what makes hospitality excellent. They confuse price with value, status with service, and luxury with respect. The observation created a stir in the room, particularly among the reporters who had covered the previous night's gala and recognized some of the attendees in the audience. Ms. Chen, said Robert Sterling, the news anchor who had hosted the previous night's auction. Are you suggesting that the guests at events like last night's charity gala don't understand hospitality? I'm suggesting that many people who frequent high-end events have never considered hospitality from the perspective of the people who provide it. I replied, they focus on their own experience without thinking about the working conditions, training, and respect that enable excellent service. Can you be more specific? I looked out at the audience and spotted Mrs. Pemberton sitting in the third row. Her expression carefully neutral, as she realized that her complaints from the previous evening were about to become public knowledge. Last night, I said, I served champagne to many of the guests at the Children's Foundation Gala. I watched people complain about service quality while creating the very problems they were criticizing. I saw guests treat servers as if they were invisible, as if their only value was in how quickly they could anticipate needs without disturbing important conversations. One guest, I continued, looking directly at Mrs. Pemberton, dropped a champagne glass, didn't acknowledge the person cleaning it up, and then complained to management about the quality of service. That kind of behavior reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of what hospitality requires. Mrs. Pemberton's face had gone pale, and I could see her calculating whether to respond or remain silent. Are you planning to change how the hotel operates based on these observations? Asked Jennifer Walsh. Absolutely, I replied. The Grand Meridian will implement new training programs that focus on mutual respect between guests and staff. We'll establish clear standards for how guests are expected to treat employees, and will empower our staff to address inappropriate behavior directly. What if guests object to these standards? Asked David Kim. Then they're welcome to find other accommodations, I said simply. The Grand Meridian's success won't be measured by how much we can charge or how many celebrities stay here. It will be measured by how well we treat both guests and employees, and by how successfully we create an environment where everyone feels valued. The press conference continued for another 30 minutes. With questions ranging from my specific plans for the hotel to broader observations about the hospitality industry. But the real story, I realized, wasn't just about a server becoming an owner. It was about challenging the assumptions that shaped how people understood service, respect, and human dignity. After the reporters left, I found myself alone in the conference room with Mrs. Pemberton, who had remained behind while the other attendees filed out. Maria, she said, her voice lacking the imperious tone that had characterized our previous interactions. "I wanted to speak with you privately about last night." "Of course, Mrs. Pemberton. What would you like to discuss?" I want to apologize for my behavior. I had no idea who you were, but that's no excuse for treating you disrespectfully." The apology was unexpected, and I studied her face for signs of sincerity or calculation. "Mrs. Pemberton," I said gently, "the problem isn't that you didn't know who I was. The problem is that you treated me poorly because you thought I was just a server. My identity shouldn't matter. What should matter is treating all people with basic respect." "You're right," she said, her voice carrying what sounded like genuine remorse. "I've been attending these events for 20 years, and I've never really thought about the people who make them possible. I've treated servers as functions rather than as people." "What changed your perspective?" "Watching you at that podium, realizing that the person I dismissed last night is now someone I need to respect today. It made me understand that my behavior wasn't just rude, was based on assumptions that were completely wrong." Mrs. Pemberton paused, clearly struggling with the implications of what she was acknowledging. "I've built my social life around events like last night's gala," she continued. "I've defined myself by my ability to navigate these spaces, to know the right people and say the right things. But I've never considered that my comfort might come at the expense of other people's dignity." The admission was profound, representing not just personal reflection, but a recognition of how social hierarchies were maintained through the casual dehumanization of service workers. "Mrs. Pemberton," I said, "I appreciate your apology, and I believe it's sincere. But I hope you understand that this conversation isn't really about me. It's about how you'll treat service staff in the future, regardless of who they might turn out to be." "I understand," she said, "and I want you to know that I'll be different. Not because you're now someone important, but because everyone deserves to be treated with respect." As Mrs. Pemberton left the conference room, I reflected on the morning's events and their broader implications. The press conference had accomplished more than just announcing new ownership of the Grand Meridian, had started a conversation about hospitality, respect, and the assumptions that shaped how people treated each other in service relationships. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, my fellow server from the previous night, saw the press conference on the news. "We're all so proud of you. Does this mean we get to keep our jobs?" I smiled, typing back, "Not only do you get to keep your jobs, you're getting raises, better training, and the authority to address disrespectful guests directly. The Grand Meridian is going to be different." The transformation from invisible server to visible owner was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Changing how the hospitality industry understood the relationship between service and dignity would require more than just one press conference or one hotel's new policies. But it was a start. And sometimes, the most powerful changes begin with someone who has been invisible, finally being seen, not just for who they've become, but for who they always were. 3 months after the acquisition, I stood in the Grand Meridian's renovated staff break room, watching as Victoria Ashworth struggled to fold napkins according to the hotel's new service standards. She was participating in the Executive Perspective program. I'd implemented a requirement that all event organizers spend a full day working alongside hotel staff to understand the realities of service work. "This is much more difficult than it looks," Victoria admitted, her perfectly manicured nails making the precise folds required for the hotel's signature napkin. Presentation nearly impossible. Around her, other charity gala organizers and society event planners were learning to set tables, serve drinks, and clean up after the kind of events they typically attended as guests. "That's exactly the point," I said, observing the group's struggles with tasks they had always taken for granted. Understanding the skill and effort required for excellent service helps event organizers create more realistic timelines and more respectful interactions with staff. The Executive Perspective program had been controversial when I'd announced it, with several long-term clients threatening to take their business elsewhere, rather than submit to what they saw as unnecessary humiliation. But the results had been remarkably. Event organizers who understood the complexity of service work created better events and treated staff with significantly more respect. Ms. Chen called out Harrison Blackwood from across the room, where he was attempting to polish silverware to the hotel's exacting standards. I have to admit that this experience has been ... educational. I had no idea how much skill was required for tasks I'd always considered simple. Harrison had initially refused to participate in the program, insisting that his role as a major client exempted him from such requirements. It had taken the threat of losing his company's substantial corporate event business to convince him to spend a day learning about hospitality from the ground up. "What specifically has surprised you?" I asked. "The precision required for everything," he replied, holding up a fork that still showed water spots despite his repeated attempts at polishing. "The timing, the coordination, the ability to anticipate needs while remaining invisible. I've been planning events for years without understanding the complexity of what I was asking people to do." The admission was significant, coming from someone who had built his reputation on attention to detail in construction projects, but had never applied that same scrutiny to understanding service work. "Mr. Blackwood," said Sophia, who was serving as one of the program's instructors, "would you like to try serving drinks to the practice table? It's important to understand how to balance a tray while navigating between chairs and maintaining conversation flow." I watched with barely concealed amusement as Harrison attempted to serve water glasses to a table of program participants without spilling or interrupting their conversation. His first attempt resulted in a minor flood and several startled exclamations from the guests at the practice table. "This is impossible," Harrison muttered, mopping up spilled water while trying to maintain the kind of professional composure that service work required. "How do you make it look so effortless?" "Practice," Sophia replied simply, "and respect for the work. When you understand that service is a skilled profession rather than just a temporary job, you develop the focus and pride necessary to excel at it." The observation highlighted one of the key insights that had emerged from the Executive Perspective program, that excellent service required not just training and experience, but a fundamental respect for the work itself and the people who performed it. "Ms. Chen." Victoria approached me with an expression that mixed frustration with something that might have been respect. "I wanted to apologize again for my behavior at the gala 3 months ago. This experience has made me realize how completely I misunderstood what you and your colleagues were doing." "What specifically have you learned?" "That service work requires intelligence, skill, and emotional labor that I never recognized or valued. That the people I dismissed as just servers were actually professionals managing complex tasks while dealing with difficult personalities, including mine." Victoria paused, clearly struggling with the implications of what she was acknowledging. "I've been organizing charity events for 15 years, she continued, "and I've always focused on the guest experience without considering the staff experience. I've created impossible timelines, made unreasonable demands, and treated service failures as personal affronts rather than as predictable results of poor planning. How will this change your approach to event planning?" "Everything will change. Longer setup times, more realistic expectations, better communication with staff, and most importantly, treating service workers as partners in creating successful events, rather than as obstacles to overcome." The transformation in Victoria's perspective was emblematic of the broader changes that had occurred throughout the Grand Meridian's client base. Event organizers who completed the Executive Perspective program consistently created better events, generated fewer complaints, and developed more collaborative relationships with hotel staff. "Attention everyone," I announced to the group. "It's time for the final component of today's programs, our veering at a real event." The participants looked nervous as I explained that they would be working alongside regular staff at a corporate reception that evening, serving drinks and hors d'oeuvres to guests who had no idea that their servers included some of the city's most prominent event organizers. "Will the guests know who we are?" asked Margaret Whitmore, Victoria's mother, who had reluctantly agreed to participate after the Children's Foundation nearly lost their preferred event dates. Not unless you tell them, I replied. You'll be wearing the same uniforms as regular staff, following the same protocols, and held to the same standards. The guests will treat you exactly as they would treat any other server. The implications were clear. They would experience firsthand the casual dismissal, unreasonable demands, and occasional rudeness that service workers dealt with regularly. What if we make mistakes? Asked Dr. Patricia Williams, whose museum had been struggling to maintain its relationship with the hotel after several incidents of staff mistreatment. Then you'll learn what it feels like to be criticized for errors while working under pressure, managing multiple tasks, and dealing with impatient guests. Sophia replied, "It's part of the job." As the participants prepared for the evening's service, I reflected on how dramatically the dynamics had shifted since my acquisition of the hotel 3 months ago. These people had treated service workers as invisible fixtures whose only value was in their ability to anticipate needs without disturbing important conversations. Now, they were about to experience service work from the inside, gaining first-hand understanding of its challenges and complexities. Ms. Chen Harrison approached me as the group prepared to change into uniforms. "I have to ask, is this really necessary? I understand the point you're making, but requiring clients to work as servers seems ... extreme." "Mr. Blackwood," I replied, 3 months ago, you complained that servers lacked professional pride while having no understanding of what their profession actually required. Tonight, you'll discover whether you can maintain professional pride while being treated as invisible by people who consider themselves your social superiors. But these are business relationships. Surely there's a more diplomatic way to address service issues. There is, I agreed. It's called treating service workers with respect from the beginning. But since that didn't happen naturally, we're providing education through experience. The evening's corporate reception proceeded exactly as I had expected. The program participants struggled with the physical demands of service work, made numerous mistakes, and experienced the casual dismissal that service workers faced regularly. But more importantly, they gained visceral understanding of what it meant to be invisible in plain sight, to be judged harshly for minor errors, and to maintain professional composure while being treated as less than human. "This is humiliating," Victoria whispered to me during a brief break. Her face flushed from the effort of carrying heavy trays and the stress of being criticized by impatient guests. "Now you understand," I replied, "what humiliation feels like from the other side. The question is whether this experience will change how you treat service workers in the future." By the end of the evening, the transformation was visible in every participant's demeanor. They moved differently, spoke more quietly, and showed a newfound appreciation for the complexity and dignity of service work. Ms. Chen, Margaret Whitmore, approached me as the event concluded, her uniform wrinkled and her composure thoroughly shaken. "I owe you an apology that goes far beyond my daughter's behavior at the gala. I've spent decades organizing events without ever considering the human cost of my demands. What will you do differently?" "Everything," she said simply. "How I plan events, how I communicate with staff, how I treat people whose work makes my success possible. Tonight showed me that I've been building my reputation on the invisible labor of people I never bothered to see as human beings." As the program participants changed out of their uniforms and prepared to return to their regular lives, I realized that the moral reversal was complete. Those who had been served had become servers. Those who had been invisible had made others invisible, and those who had demanded respect had learned what it meant to be denied it. The executive perspective program wasn't just about improving service quality or reducing staff turnover. It was about fundamentally changing how people understood the relationship between service and dignity, between work and worth, between visibility and value. The transformation from invisible server to visible owner had given me the power to create these changes. But the real revolution was happening in the minds and hearts of people who were finally learning to see. service workers as human beings deserving of respect, recognition, and dignity. 1 year after acquiring the Grand Meridian Hotel, I stood before the International Hospitality Excellence Awards, accepting recognition for revolutionary leadership in service industry transformation. The irony wasn't lost on me. 12 months earlier, I had been serving champagne to many of the people now applauding my achievements in hospitality innovation. When I began working in the service industry, I said, addressing an audience of hotel owners, restaurant executives, and hospitality professionals from around the world, I learned that excellence in service requires more than just training and procedures. It requires dignity, respect, and the recognition that hospitality is a skilled profession, deserving of the same regard we give to any other form of expertise. The Grand Meridian's transformation had become a case study in hospitality. Education programs, with business schools sending students to observe our operations and competitors attempting to replicate our staff development programs. But the real measure of success wasn't in awards or academic recognition. It was in the daily interactions between staff and guests that had fundamentally changed. The most important lesson I've learned, I continued, is that true hospitality flows both ways. Guests who treat staff with respect receive better service, not because staff are motivated by gratitude, but because mutual respect creates an environment where everyone can perform at their best. After the ceremony, I returned to the Grand Meridian to find the lobby bustling with activity from a medical conference reception. But something was different from the events I had served just a year before. The interactions between guests and staff were marked by courtesy, appreciation, and genuine human connection. Ms. Chen Sophia approached me with a smile that reflected the confidence and pride that had developed among our entire staff. The conference organizers wanted me to thank you personally. They said this was the most smoothly run event they'd ever attended. What made the difference? Everything, she replied. The guests treated us like professionals. The organizers planned realistic timelines, and when problems arose, everyone worked together to solve them, instead of looking for someone to blame. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had required consistent enforcement of new standards, difficult conversations with long-term clients, and the willingness to lose business from people who refused to adapt to our expectations of mutual respect. Ms. Chen Marcus appeared with a tablet displaying the evening's social media mentions. The conference attendees are posting about their experience, and the feedback is remarkable. I scrolled through posts that highlighted not just the hotel's amenities or service quality, but the respectful interactions between staff and guests. Comments praised servers by name, thanked housekeeping staff for their attention to detail, and noted the professionalism of everyone, from valet attendants to concierge staff. This is what success looks like, I said, showing Sophia the posts. Not just satisfied customers, but recognition of the people who make satisfaction possible. The evening's event was winding down when I noticed a familiar face among the departing guests, Ms. Pemberton, who had been attending a medical conference as a patient advocate. She approached me with an expression that mixed warmth with something that might have been embarrassment. "Maria," she said, "I wanted to thank you for what you've accomplished here. Not just with the hotel, but with changing how people think about service and respect. What specifically have you noticed? Everything is different. The way guests interact with staff, the way staff carry themselves, the atmosphere of mutual appreciation that pervades every interaction. It's like visiting a completely different kind of establishment." Mrs. Pemberton paused, clearly reflecting on her own transformation over the past year. "I've been thinking about our conversation after the press conference," she continued, "about treating people with respect, regardless of who they might turn out to be. I realize that the lesson goes deeper than just being polite to service workers." "How so?" "It's about recognizing that everyone has value, dignity, and potential that might not be immediately visible. It's about understanding that social hierarchies are artificial constructs that prevent us from seeing people's true worth." The observation was profound, representing not just personal growth, but a fundamental shift in how she understood social relationships and human value. Mrs. Pemberton, I said, I'm curious about something. How has this change in perspective affected other areas of your life? Dramatically, she replied. I've started volunteering at the hospital where tonight's conference was held, working directly with patients rather than just writing checks to medical charities. I've discovered that the people I once saw as recipients of my charity are actually sources of wisdom, strength, and inspiration. I've also changed how I approach my social obligations. Instead of attending events to see and be seen, I focus on how I can contribute meaningfully to causes I care about. Instead of treating service workers as invisible, I make an effort to learn their names and acknowledge their contributions. As Mrs. Pemberton prepared to leave, she turned back with one final observation. You know, Maria, what you've accomplished here goes far beyond transforming one hotel. You've demonstrated that business success and human dignity aren't competing. Values, they're complementary forces that strengthen each other. After the last guests departed and the staff completed their closing procedures, I found myself alone in the lobby that had become the symbol of a new approach to hospitality. The Grand Meridian's success wasn't measured just in occupancy rates or revenue growth, but in the transformation of how an entire industry understood the relationship between service and dignity. Ms. Chen Sophia appeared one final time. Having finished her shift but wanting to share something before leaving, I got accepted to the Hospitality Management program at Cornell. The scholarship you helped me apply for came through. The news filled me with pride that went beyond business success. Sophia's advancement represented the kind of opportunity that became possible when service work was recognized as a skilled profession worthy of investment and development. That's wonderful, Sophia. Will you be able to continue working while you're in school, part-time, during breaks and summers? But I wanted you to know that I plan to come back after graduation. What we've built here, this model of respectful hospitality, I want to help expand it to other properties. As Sophia left for the evening and I prepared to close the hotel for the night, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from invisible server to visible leader. The transformation had required more than just financial resources or business acumen. It had required the courage to challenge assumptions about worth, dignity, and human value that pervaded the service industry. The champagne I had served a year ago had been poured by someone whose potential was invisible to the people drinking it. Tonight, that same person owned the establishment, had revolutionized its operations, and was inspiring similar changes throughout the hospitality industry. But the real victory wasn't in my personal transformation, it was in the daily interactions between staff and guests that now reflected mutual respect, appreciation, and recognition of shared humanity. The Grand Meridian had become proof that business success and human dignity weren't just compatible, they were inseparable. Sometimes the most powerful transformation happens not when the invisible become visible, but when everyone learns to see the dignity that was always there, waiting to be acknowledged and honored. The hotel that had once hosted events where servers were treated as invisible fixtures now stood as a beacon of what hospitality could become when it was built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared humanity. And that transformation was spreading, one interaction at a time, one hotel at a time, one industry at a time. The revolution had begun with a simple recognition that the person serving champagne might be more than they appeared to be. But it had evolved into something much more profound, the understanding that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their role, their background, or their apparent position in society's hierarchies. In the end, that was the most valuable lesson the Grand Meridian had to offer. That true hospitality begins with seeing the humanity in everyone we encounter, and that success measured only in financial terms is ultimately hollow if it comes at the expense of human dignity. The transformation was complete, but the work of building a more respectful and equitable hospitality industry was just beginning.